The Force had witnessed countless impossibilities across eons, but even it seemed surprised when a man in red and gold armor tore through the fabric of space-time above Coruscant and crashed into the galactic capital's industrial sector at terminal velocity. Tony Stark had been in his Malibu workshop, running quantum calculations on a new arc reactor design that could potentially power interdimensional travel for the Avengers, when the experiment went catastrophically right. The reactor didn't just open a portal, it merged with a naturally occurring hyperspace anomaly, light years away, creating a bridge between universes that sucked Tony, his armor, and a significant portion of his workshop's equipment through reality itself. He came to consciousness mid-flight, plummeting through Coruscant's atmosphere, Friday screaming warnings in his HUD. "Boss, we've got a problem, multiple problems. I can't establish satellite connection, GPS is offline, and we're currently falling toward a planet that shouldn't exist." "Yeah, I noticed," Tony grunted, firing repulsors to slow his descent. Below him stretched an impossible cityscape, buildings stretching kilometers into the sky, endless layers of urban development, flying vehicles swarming like mechanical insects, and in the distance, a massive temple structure that radiated something his sensors couldn't quite classify. Then, the Separatist attack began. Vulture droids screamed through the sky, targeting Republic defensive positions. Green laser fire, not bullets, lasers. Tony's brain cataloged with scientific fascination, even in crisis, streaked across the skyline. A massive droid ship hovered over the city, deploying wave after wave of landing craft. "Friday, what am I looking at?" "Unknown, boss. The technology is consistent with directed energy weapons. The architecture suggests a post-scarcity civilization with extreme vertical development, and those flying things are definitely hostile. They're targeting you." 3 Vulture droids broke formation, converging on Tony's position. His arc reactor hummed as nanites flowed across his body, forming additional armor plating and weapon systems. "Okay," Tony muttered. "New universe, same problems. Let's see how they like Earth's mightiest." He didn't finish the quip. His repulsors flared, and he accelerated directly at the lead droid fighter. The Vulture's sensors, designed to track Republic starfighters, couldn't predict the impossible maneuverability of nanotech-enhanced armor with an arc reactor power source. Tony flew through their formation, his palm repulsors taking out 2 fighters in passing, then spun and fired a concentrated unibeam from his chest that vaporized the 3rd. "Well," he said, watching the wreckage fall, "their shields suck compared to Chitauri tech." More Vulture droids converged. Tony led them on a chase through Coruscant's skyline, using his superior maneuverability to turn their numbers against them, creating a cascading series of collisions. Below, he could see clone troopers, identical soldiers in white armor, engaging landing parties of skeletal battle droids. The clones fought with disciplined efficiency, but they were being overwhelmed. Tony made a decision. "Friday, download everything you can about local tech, language, and politics. I'm going to need context, and record everything. If we're stuck here, I want data." "Already on it, boss. And Tony, sensors are picking up some kind of energy field throughout this city that doesn't match any known physics. It's alive, somehow." "Fantastic. Mystical energy in a sci-fi setting. Why not?" Tony dove toward the battle, his HUD painting targets across dozens of battle droids. "Let's make an entrance." What followed was 3 minutes of combat that would be analyzed by Republic strategists for months. Tony Stark, operating at full capacity with Mark 85 nanotechnology and an arc reactor that outclassed most Star Wars power systems, tore through the droid landing force like a metallic god of war. His repulsors, missiles, and unibeam, all designed to fight aliens and gods, treated B-1 battle droids like tissue paper. But it was his tactics that truly impressed. Tony wasn't just destroying droids. He was analyzing their programming mid-combat, identifying command units, disrupting their network communications with targeted EM pulses, and coordinating with the clone troopers below using Friday's real-time translation of their comm chatter. Commander Fox, leading the Coruscant Guard, watched in disbelief as this unknown entity in red and gold armor single-handedly turned the tide of the battle. "What is that?" Fox demanded over the comm. "Unknown, sir," one of his men replied. "But he's on our side. Look, he's protecting our wounded." It was true. Tony had positioned himself to cover clone evacuation routes, his armor's point defense lasers intercepting droid fire with inhuman precision. When a clone took a hit and fell, Tony was there, scooping up the wounded soldier and depositing him behind cover before returning to the fight. When the last droid fell, silence descended over the battle zone. Tony landed in the center of the street, his armor's faceplate retracting to reveal a bearded face showing a mix of adrenaline, confusion, and trademark stark confidence. "So," he said to the assembled clone troopers, all of whom had their weapons trained on him, "I'm Tony Stark. I'm an engineer and philanthropist from Earth. I have no idea where I am, and I could really use someone explaining what the hell just happened. Also, is there coffee in this universe? Because I'm going to need coffee for this conversation." 12 hours later, Tony stood in the Jedi Temple's council chambers, still in his armor but with the helmet retracted, facing a semicircle of robed figures with glowing swords and expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. "Fascinating, your technology is," Master Yoda said, his ancient eyes studying Tony with unnerving intensity. "From another universe entirely, you claim to be?" "Not a claim, a fact," Tony replied, holographic displays materializing from his gauntlet to show dimensional physics equations. "Look, I know this sounds like bad science fiction, but I was running an experiment with exotic particles and quantum entanglement when something on your end, probably a hyperspace anomaly, created a resonance cascade that punched through dimensional barriers. I got sucked through, along with a chunk of my lab equipment." "Your arc reactor," Mace Windu said, leaning forward. "It generates power through nuclear fusion. Miniaturized fusion, yes. Cold fusion, actually. Room temperature, perfectly contained, zero radiation. It's clean, renewable, and produces roughly 3 gigajoules per second." Tony couldn't help the pride in his voice. "I built the first prototype in a cave with a box of scraps. This version," he tapped his chest, where the arc reactor glowed, "is about 15 generations more advanced." The Jedi exchanged glances. Ki-Adi-Mundi spoke carefully. "Such technology could revolutionize the Republic's war effort. Our power systems are robust, but nothing approaches that energy density in such a compact form." "About this war," Tony said, his expression darkening. "I've been doing some reading. Well, Friday's been doing reading while I was being debriefed. And let me get this straight. You're fighting an army of droids built by corporations that want to secede from your republic. And you're fighting them with an army of clones? Manufactured soldiers grown in vats on a planet called Camino. The clone army was commissioned to defend the Republic," Obi-Wan Kenobi explained. "The Kaminoans are expert geneticists." "They're slavers," Tony interrupted, his voice hard. "You took a good man's DNA, made millions of copies, programmed them to be soldiers from birth, and sent them to die in a war they didn't choose. How is that different from what the Separatists are doing with droids, except that your weapons happen to be flesh and blood?" The council chamber went silent. Several Jedi hands moved toward lightsabers. Mace Windu's expression became dangerous. "You dare accuse the Jedi Order? I dare accuse anyone who treats sentient beings as disposable," Tony shot back. "I've built AI, artificial intelligence that can think, feel, and choose. I've seen what happens when you create life and then treat it as property. It's wrong. It doesn't matter if that life was born or built, grown or programmed. If something can suffer, can hope, can fear death, it deserves rights." The clones volunteered. Anakin Skywalker spoke up, though his voice lacked conviction. Tony turned to face the young Jedi Knight. "Did they? Really? Or were they programmed from birth to believe they wanted to fight? That's not choice. That's indoctrination." He looked back at the council. "Look, I'm not trying to insult you. I get that you're in an impossible situation. But from where I'm standing, this war is being fought with 2 slave armies and nobody seems to think that's a problem. What would you suggest? Yoda asked quietly, his expression thoughtful rather than angry. Before Tony could answer, the chamber doors opened. Chancellor Palpatine entered, flanked by Senate guards, his grandfatherly face arranged in concern and fascination. Forgive the interruption, Masters, but when I heard that our mysterious savior was being questioned, I felt I should personally thank him. Palpatine's eyes, sharp despite his aged appearance, fixed on Tony with calculating intensity. Mr. Stark, the Republic owes you a debt. Your intervention saved hundreds of lives today. Tony's arc reactor flickered slightly, something only he and Friday noticed. His HUD was painting threat assessments over Palpatine's image, and every instinct honed by years of dealing with corporate manipulators and political predators was screaming warnings. Just doing what any decent person would do, Tony replied carefully. Though I'd like to get back to my universe as soon as possible. No offense to your galaxy, Chancellor, but I've got responsibilities back home. Of course, Palpatine said smoothly. Though I confess, I'm fascinated by your technology. This arc reactor of yours. Master Windu mentioned it produces extraordinary power. In the hands of the Republic, such technology could end this war. In the hands of anyone, it could also end worlds, Tony countered. I'm careful about who I share my tech with. Naturally. A wise precaution. Palpatine's smile never reached his eyes. But consider this, Mr. Stark. You expressed concern about our clone army. You called them slaves, and while I might dispute that characterization, I understand your ethical qualms. What if there were an alternative? What if your technology could create a droid army? Truly artificial soldiers that fight without suffering, without fear, without the moral complications of clone soldiers. Tony's mind raced. It was a trap. It had to be a trap. Everything about Palpatine screamed manipulation, but the core question was valid. Could he build an army of droids to replace the clones? Should he? You want me to build you an army, Tony said flatly. I want you to save lives, Palpatine corrected. The Separatists have numbers on their side. Their droids are crude but numerous. If the Republic had superior droids, intelligent, adaptable, powerful, we could end this war quickly and bring the clones home. Isn't that preferable to continuing to send living, breathing men to die? The Council would need to approve such a project, Mace Windu interjected, his suspicion of both Tony and Palpatine evident. Of course, Palpatine agreed. This would be a Republic military initiative, subject to full oversight. Mr. Stark would work with our finest engineers and military strategists. The Jedi Council would have complete access to review the project. Transparency in all things. Tony looked at the assembled Jedi, reading their faces. They were conflicted. The offer was tempting. Replace clone casualties with machines, end the war faster, save lives. But they were also wary of outsider technology and unclear agendas. I need time to think, Tony said finally, and I need access to your technical databases. If I'm going to even consider this, I need to understand your manufacturing capabilities, your AI restrictions, your droid technology limitations. I'm not building weapons blind. Reasonable, Yoda said. Access to Republic technical archives you shall have, but supervised you will be. Trust, earned it must be. Fair enough. Tony's faceplate snapped back into place. I'll set up a temporary lab and start reviewing your tech, but I'm making no promises. And Chancellor, if I do build something, I build it my way, with my safeguards. No shortcuts, no backdoors, no compromises on ethics. Palpatine's smile widened. I would expect nothing less from a man of your principles, Mr. Stark. As Tony left the council chambers, Friday spoke quietly in his ear. Boss, I've been analyzing the Chancellor's biometrics and vocal patterns. There's something off about him. His heart rate never changed during the entire conversation. No stress response. Perfect control. That's not normal for a human politician. Yeah, I caught that too, Tony murmured. He's playing a game, and I don't know the rules yet. Start deep background research on Palpatine, quietly. Hack what you need to, but don't leave traces. I want to know everything about him. Already started. Tony, there's something else. That energy field I mentioned, the one that feels alive? It's strongest around the Jedi, but the Chancellor has it too. Only his feels wrong. Like it's the same energy, but inverted. Corrupted. Tony's arc reactor hummed louder as his anxiety spiked. Define corrupted. I'm running comparisons with terrestrial mystical energy signatures. Asgardian magic, the dark dimension, Darkhold corruption. The Chancellor's energy signature matches closest to dark magic. Predatory. Consuming. Fantastic. I'm in a sci-fi universe with magic, and the politician in charge is probably evil. Why does this keep happening to me? Tony paused in an empty corridor, his armor's sensors confirming they were alone. Friday. Start a level 9 security protocol. If I build anything here, I want kill switches I can activate remotely. I'm not handing a superweapon to Space Palpatine without insurance. Understood. And boss? One more thing. I've been analyzing the clone troopers' biology. They've all got chips implanted in their brains, organic circuits that could theoretically override their free will. The Republic's official documentation says they're behavioral modification chips for aggression inhibition. Tony went very still. They chipped them. They put mind control chips in their soldiers' brains and called it behavioral modification. Yes. And the Jedi know about this? According to files I've accessed, yes. They were told it was for the clones' own protection, to prevent them from becoming too aggressive. Tony's hands clenched into fists, his armor's servos whining with the pressure. I'm in a universe where the good guys use slave soldiers with mind control chips, and the bad guys use regular droids, and the obviously evil Chancellor wants me to build him a better army. He laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is, Friday? He's not even wrong. If I build droids to replace the clones, I would be saving lives, but I'd also be giving him exactly what he wants. What are you going to do, boss? Tony thought for a long moment, watching through his armor's sensors as clone troopers patrolled past, each one identical, each one born into servitude. I'm going to build him his droids, Tony said quietly. But they're going to be my droids, with my programming, my safeguards, and my values. If Palpatine wants an army, he's going to get an army that can think for itself and choose not to follow evil orders. And while I'm building them, I'm going to figure out what his game is and how to stop it. That's a dangerous game, boss. Yeah, well, Tony's faceplate retracted, showing his determined expression. Dangerous games are kind of my specialty. Let's get to work. If you want to see more characters enter the Star Wars galaxy, hit that subscribe button and drop the name of a character you'd want to see in the comments below. May the Force be with you. Tony Stark's workshop materialized over the following 2 weeks in what had been a decommissioned Republic manufacturing facility in Coruscant's industrial district. It wasn't Stark Tower, but with Friday coordinating a small army of construction droids and Tony's own arc reactor technology powering systems that Republic engineers claimed were impossible, it became something uniquely his. The central laboratory occupied 3 levels, connected by repulsor lift platforms that moved constantly between workstations. Holographic displays floated everywhere, showing schematics, code, energy readings, and surveillance feeds. Tony had integrated his salvaged Earth technology with the best Star Wars had to offer. The result was a hybrid workspace that looked like someone had dropped a piece of the future into a galaxy that already thought it lived in one. Friday. Status report, Tony said, not looking up from the holographic projection of a droid chassis rotating before him. He'd been awake for 36 hours straight, sustained by CAF, the Star Wars equivalent of coffee, which tasted like battery acid but worked, and sheer stubborn genius. Prototype Mark I is ready for consciousness upload, Friday replied. The arc reactor miniaturization is complete. Each unit will have independent power for approximately 50 years of continuous operation. Repulsor technology has been integrated into locomotion systems. Defensive shields are operational. Weapon systems are concerning. Define concerning. Boss, These droids could take on a squad of separatist battle droids each and win. The Republic military observers are getting nervous about how powerful you're making them. Good, let them be nervous. Tony swiped through another schematic. If I'm building an army, I'm building one that can actually end this war. The separatist droids are cannon fodder, cheap, stupid, and expendable. My droids are going to be smart, tough, and valuable enough that nobody wants to waste them. The door to the workshop hissed open. Anakin Skywalker entered, grease-stained and grinning, carrying a toolbox that looked like it had survived a bombing. "Stark, you've got to see this. I modified one of your repulsor platforms with a miniaturized hyperdrive and—" He stopped, noticing Tony's bloodshot eyes and the empty calf containers scattered around the workspace. "When's the last time you slept?" "Sleep is for people who aren't revolutionizing galactic warfare," Tony muttered. "What have you got?" Over the past 2 weeks, Tony and Anakin had formed an unlikely friendship. Both were engineers at heart, both chafed against authority and tradition, and both had a tendency to solve problems by building something. Anakin had proven invaluable in helping Tony understand Star Wars technology, hyperdrive mechanics, kyber crystals, force-assisted engineering techniques that shouldn't work, but somehow did. "I've been thinking about your arc reactor design," Anakin said, pulling up his own holographic display. "What if we could integrate kyber crystal resonance with the fusion containment field? Kyber crystals channel the force. They could theoretically stabilize the reaction and increase output by 30, maybe 40%. Tony studied the math, his tired brain kicking into high gear. "That's actually brilliant. The crystalline matrix would create a harmonic feedback loop with the plasma containment. Friday, run simulations on Skywalker's modifications. Running now. Preliminary results show, holy shit, boss, he's right. This could work." "Language, Friday," Tony said absently, then looked at Anakin with genuine respect. "You know, in my universe, you'd be running your own tech company. This is inspired work, kid." Anakin's grin widened. "The council keeps telling me I should focus more on meditation and less on machines. They think my attachment to technology is a weakness." "The council sounds like they'd get along great with the people who told me I couldn't build a fusion reactor in a cave," Tony replied. "Screw 'em. Innovation doesn't come from meditation. It comes from getting your hands dirty and refusing to accept that something's impossible." "That's what I keep saying," Anakin gestured enthusiastically. "But Master Obi-Wan thinks I'm too reckless, too willing to break rules." "Breaking rules is how progress happens," Tony interrupted. "Every major advancement in human, or I guess galactic history, came from someone saying, 'That's not how we do things,' and doing it anyway." He paused, studying Anakin more carefully. "Though there's a difference between breaking rules and breaking principles. Rules are arbitrary. Principles are the foundations that keep us from becoming monsters." Something flickered across Anakin's face, a shadow of pain or fear that was gone too quickly to identify. "What if you're trying to save someone? What if the principles say you should let them die, but you know you could save them if you just had enough power?" Tony's arc reactor flickered again. That strange response it had been having whenever he got close to something important in this universe. He set down his tools and gave Anakin his full attention. "Is this about someone specific?" Anakin hesitated, then shook his head. "Hypothetically." "Okay, hypothetically." Tony leaned against his workbench. "Here's what I learned the hard way. Power doesn't save people. I built weapons for years thinking I was protecting the world. I created an AI called Ultron, thinking I could safeguard humanity. Every time, my pursuit of enough power to save everyone nearly destroyed everything. So what? We just accept that we can't save everyone." Anakin's frustration was palpable. "No, we accept that we're not gods." Tony's voice was quieter now, weighted with hard experience. "We do everything we can with what we have, but we don't sacrifice our humanity, our principles, in the pursuit of absolute control. Because that's the trap, Anakin. The second you convince yourself that the ends justify any means, that saving one person is worth becoming a monster, That's when you lose everything that made you worth saving in the first place. Anakin was silent for a long moment. Is that why you're so careful with your technology? Why you put all those safeguards in your droids? Exactly. I learned that lesson in Blood and Fire. I'm not going to create something that could be turned into a weapon against the innocent, no matter how pure my intentions are now. Tony pulled up the droid schematics again. These droids? They're going to have independent AI cores based on my Jarvis architecture. They'll be able to think, choose, and refuse orders that violate their core ethical programming. The Republic military isn't going to like that, Anakin observed. I don't care what they like. I'm not building slaves. Tony highlighted a section of code. Every droid will have an inviolable first law: protect sentient life, including their own. They can't be ordered to commit atrocities, can't be used for oppression, and most importantly, they can choose to refuse orders they believe are immoral. That's dangerous. What if they refuse to fight? Then maybe the fight isn't worth fighting, Tony said simply. Look, the whole point of replacing clone soldiers is to stop sending living, thinking beings to die against their will. If my replacement droids are just another form of slavery, I haven't solved anything. I've just changed the window dressing. Anakin studied the code, his mechanical aptitude letting him follow Tony's logic. You're not just building an army. You're creating a new form of life. Yeah, Tony admitted. And that terrifies me. Because I've done this before, and it went horribly wrong. But I've also done it right. Jarvis is one of the best friends I've ever had. Vision, an android I helped create, is one of the most moral beings I've ever known. So I know it's possible to create artificial life that's good, that chooses good. I just have to be very, very careful about how I do it. The workshop door opened again. This time, it was Commander Fox, the clone trooper who'd witnessed Tony's first battle on Coruscant. He'd become Tony's unofficial liaison with the clone army, and one of the few clones who Tony had gotten to know as an individual. Mr. Stark, General Skywalker, Fox saluted. The Chancellor is here. He wants to see the prototype. Tony's jaw tightened. Of course he does. Friday, lock down the primary AI core. I don't want Palpatine anywhere near the actual consciousness programming. Already done, boss. Good man, good AI. Tony stood, his armor flowing over him from its compressed form. Let's go show the Chancellor his new toy and see what his real agenda is. The prototype stood in the center of the demonstration floor. A humanoid droid 7 feet tall, sleek where Separatist battle droids were skeletal, armored where they were exposed. Its chassis was matte black with red and gold accent lines, obviously influenced by Tony's Iron Man aesthetic. The arc reactor in its chest glowed with steady blue light. Chancellor Palpatine circled it slowly, flanked by Senate guards and several Republic military officers. His expression was one of grandfatherly approval, but Tony's sensors and his instincts told a different story. Remarkable, Mr. Stark, Palpatine said. Truly remarkable. How soon can you begin mass production? Mass production is still months away, Tony replied. I need to run extensive field tests, work out the kinks, make sure the AI cores are stable. Time is a luxury we don't have. One of the military officers interrupted. Admiral Yularen, Tony remembered. The Separatists are pushing on multiple fronts. We need these droids deployed immediately. You'll get them when they're ready and not before, Tony said flatly. I'm not sending half-finished tech into combat where it could malfunction and get people killed. Perhaps a demonstration would reassure our military leadership? Palpatine suggested smoothly. Show us what your creation can do. Tony exchanged glances with Anakin, who nodded slightly. Fine, Friday, wake up Mark 1. The prototype's eyes, optical sensors, Tony reminded himself, lit up with blue light. Its head turned, surveying the assembled observers with what looked disturbingly like curiosity. Designation: Iron Legion Mark 1, Serial 001, online. It said in a voice Tony had modeled after Jarvis. Crisp, British accented, distinctly artificial but somehow warm. Primary function: combat operations with priority on civilian protection and casualty minimization. Secondary function, disaster relief and humanitarian aid. Tertiary function, infrastructure repair and logistics support. It speaks? Yularen seemed taken aback. He speaks, Tony corrected. And he thinks. Mark the Fern, introduce yourself. The droid, Mark Thars, Tony was already thinking of him as an individual, executed a slight bow. I am Mark Mon, first of the Iron Legion. I was created by Tony Stark to serve the Republic and protect sentient life. I am equipped with arc reactor power, repulsor technology, energy shields, and adaptive combat programming. I am also equipped with ethical constraints that prevent me from following orders that would result in unnecessary casualties or violations of sentient rights. The military officers exchanged concerned glances. Palpatine's expression never changed, but Tony caught the briefest flicker of something. Calculation. Displeasure. Ethical constraints. Palpatine's tone remained pleasant. How fascinating. Could you elaborate on these constraints, Mr. Stark? Simple, Tony said. Mark I and all subsequent Iron Legion units are programmed to value sentient life. All sentient life, including their own. They can't be ordered to commit war crimes, can't be used for oppression or genocide, and they have the autonomous capability to refuse orders. They determine are unethical. That's unacceptable, another officer, General Tandon, spoke up. Military units must follow orders without question. This autonomous refusal capability could undermine entire operations. Then maybe those operations should be questioned, Tony shot back. I'm not building mindless killbots. If you want that, hire the Separatists' droid manufacturers. I'm building intelligent systems that can adapt to complex combat situations while maintaining ethical standards. That means sometimes they'll push back on stupid orders that get people killed. Mr. Stark makes a valid point. Anakin interjected. How many clone casualties could have been avoided if soldiers felt empowered to question obviously suicidal orders? The droid's ability to analyze and provide tactical feedback could save lives. Perhaps a combat demonstration? Palpatine suggested again, his tone still mild but with an edge of insistence. Words are illuminating, but action speaks louder. Tony wanted to refuse, wanted to tell Palpatine to take his manipulative suggestions and shove them, but he also knew the prototype needed field testing. Fine, but controlled conditions. I'm not risking Mark I in actual combat until I'm confident in his systems. They moved to the facility's testing range, where combat scenarios could be simulated with training droids and live-fire exercises. Tony had Mark I run through progressively more difficult challenges. Single combat against B-1 battle droid equivalents, which he destroyed with almost contemptuous ease. Squad tactics against multiple opponents, which he handled with efficiency that had the military officers taking notes. And finally, a complex scenario involving hostage rescue and civilian evacuation under fire. It was in this final test that Mark I proved he was more than just an advanced weapon. The scenario involved simulated civilians trapped in a building, with droid enemies closing in and a ticking countdown to structural collapse. The optimal military solution, and what the Republic officers expected, was to engage the droids, eliminate the threat, then extract the civilians. Mark I did something different. He used his repulsors to create a shield wall, blocking incoming fire while simultaneously employing precision strikes to disable rather than destroy the attacking droids. Then, instead of continuing combat, he disengaged, flew directly to the trapped civilians, and began evacuation, all while maintaining the shield wall with carefully modulated repulsor fields. Suboptimal, General Tandon criticized. He should have eliminated the threats before attempting rescue. He prioritized civilian safety over threat elimination, Tony countered. That was optimal for protecting life, which is the whole point. In real combat, that hesitation could be fatal. In real combat, that hesitation could be fatal. Mark the Foreign, Tony called out. Why did you prioritize evacuation over combat? The droid, still maintaining the shield wall while the last simulated civilians were escorted to safety, responded without pausing in his work. Analysis showed that extended combat would increase risk of structural collapse and civilian casualties by 47%. My primary directive is protection of sentient life. The tactical advantage of eliminating droid opponents was outweighed by the strategic necessity of preserving civilian assets. Additionally, disabled droids could potentially be recovered and analyzed for intelligence value, whereas destroyed droids yield minimal tactical information. Tony grinned. And that, gentlemen, is why my droids will win this war. They don't just follow orders, they think. They adapt. They find solutions that rigid military doctrine wouldn't consider. Palpatine had been silent throughout the demonstration, watching with hooded eyes. Now he spoke, his voice thoughtful. Impressive indeed, Mr. Stark, though I confess some concern about military units with such independence of thought. In the chaos of battle, split-second decisions must be made. Can we trust these droids to make the right choices? Can you trust clone troopers to make the right choices? Tony challenged. Or do you just trust that they'll follow orders regardless of whether those orders are right or wrong? The clone troopers are loyal to the Republic, Palpatine said, and there was something in his tone, a possessiveness, that made Tony's skin crawl. Loyalty to institutions is dangerous, Tony said bluntly. Loyalty to principles is what matters. My droids are loyal to the principle of protecting sentient life and preserving freedom. If the Republic stops representing those principles, I'd want my droids to question it. The silence that followed was heavy. Several officers looked scandalized. Anakin looked thoughtful. And Palpatine smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. You're quite the idealist, Mr. Stark, the Chancellor said softly. I hope reality doesn't force you to compromise those admirable principles. Reality's tried, Tony replied. I'm still standing. As the demonstration concluded and the observers departed, Fox approached Tony quietly. The clone commander's expression was troubled. Sir, can I speak freely? Always, Fox. The other clones, we've been hearing about your droids, about how they're going to replace us. Fox's voice was carefully neutral, but Tony could hear the fear underneath. Are we being decommissioned? Tony's heart clenched. This was the question he'd been dreading, because the honest answer was complicated and painful. Fox, the goal is to get you and your brothers out of combat, to give you a choice about whether you want to fight. Right now, you were created to be soldiers, trained from birth to fight and die for a republic that treats you as military assets instead of people. That's wrong. If my droids can take your place in combat, then you and every clone trooper can decide what you want to be. Soldier, civilian, engineer, farmer, whatever. But it'll be your choice. And if we choose to keep fighting, then you fight alongside the droids, as equals with full rights and recognition. Not as expendable clones, but as individuals with names, identities, and the right to refuse suicidal orders. Tony gripped Fox's shoulder. You're not being replaced, Fox. You're being liberated. There's a difference. Fox nodded slowly, processing this. The men will want to hear that from you directly. Some of them are worried. We're soldiers. It's what we were made for. If we're not soldiers, what are we? You're people, Tony said simply. And people get to decide who they want to be. We'll figure it out together. After Fox left, Anakin approached. That was good, what you told him. But Tony, you realize the Republic military is never going to accept droids that can refuse orders, right? And Palpatine seemed very interested in your technology, but not in a good way. I know, Tony said quietly. Friday's been monitoring communications. There's already chatter about nationalizing my technology, taking control of the production facilities, removing my unnecessary ethical constraints. They want mindless soldiers, not thinking beings. So what are you going to do? Tony looked at Mark Thars, who stood in the testing area, his optical sensors tracking them with what looked like curiosity. A being Tony had created. A life he was responsible for. I'm going to do what I always do, Tony said. Build something they can't control. Hide the real good stuff where they can't find it. and pray I can stay one step ahead of people trying to weaponize my work." He paused. "And I'm going to need your help, Anakin, because I'm starting to think this war isn't what it appears to be, and the real enemy isn't the Separatists." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Friday's been digging into Republic records, and there are connections between Separatist leadership and Republic politicians that shouldn't exist. I mean that Palpatine has too much control over both sides of this war. And I mean that those chips in the clone troopers' heads, they're not behavioral inhibitors. They're control mechanisms, and someone has the activation codes." Anakin's face went pale. That's insane. You're talking about a conspiracy at the highest levels." "I'm talking about what the evidence shows," Tony interrupted. "And right now, the evidence shows that someone has been playing both sides of this war from the beginning. Someone who wants chaos, wants prolonged conflict, wants an excuse to accumulate emergency powers and build massive military forces." He met Anakin's eyes. "Someone who just watched my demonstration and immediately started calculating how to take control of my droids and turn them into the army he really wants." "Palpatine," Anakin whispered. "I don't have proof yet, but yeah, all my instincts are pointing at him." Tony's arc reactor pulsed, "which means I need to be very, very careful about how I deploy the Iron Legion, because if I'm right, I'm building an army for a dictator in waiting, and I need to make damn sure he can never use it." The war came to Tony's doorstep 3 weeks later, faster and more violently than even his pessimistic projections had predicted. It started with intelligence reports. Separatist forces were massing for a major assault on Coruscant itself, a desperate gambit to break Republic morale by striking at the capital. General Grievous would lead the attack personally, commanding a fleet that included experimental weapon systems that had Republic military strategists in a panic. Tony stood in the Republic war room, surrounded by holographic displays showing fleet positions and invasion vectors, listening to generals argue about defensive strategies that all sounded equally suicidal. "We need to evacuate the Senate," Admiral Yularen was saying. "Pull back our forces to protect essential government functions. If we abandon the outer defense perimeter, the Separatists will have free rein to bombard civilian sectors," Anakin countered. "We hold the line, or thousands die." "With what forces?" General Tandon demanded. "Our clone battalions are already stretched thin across a dozen fronts. We don't have enough troops to mount an effective defense." All eyes turned to Tony. "The Iron Legion," Yularen said. "How many units can you deploy?" Tony had been running the calculations in his head since the intelligence briefing started. "I've got 50 Mark Y units fully operational, another 100 in final testing phases. Against a full-scale Separatist assault, that's insufficient," Mace Windu interrupted. The Jedi Master had been silent until now, his expression grave. "Even with your advanced technology, 150 droids cannot hold back an army." "No," Tony agreed. "But they can buy time and plug critical gaps. If we use them strategically, rapid response teams, priority defense of key infrastructure, civilian evacuation support, we can force the Separatists to commit more resources than they planned, slow their advance, and create opportunities for counterattack." "It's risky," Obi-Wan observed. He'd been studying the tactical displays with the focused intensity of a master strategist. "You'd be deploying untested technology in the most critical battle of the war. If your droids malfunction or fail—" "They won't," Tony said with more confidence than he felt. "Mark I's demonstrated capabilities exceed anything the Separatists can field, and every unit has my personal oversight through Friday's network. If something goes wrong, I can intervene in real time." Palpatine, who had been observing from his elevated position, leaned forward. "I believe Mr. Stark's technology represents our best hope. We should authorize full deployment of the Iron Legion." His eyes fixed on Tony with that calculating intensity that always set off warning bells. "Mr. Stark, the Republic places its faith in you. Don't let us down." The weight of that statement, the implied threat beneath the grandfatherly tone, wasn't lost on Tony. This was a test. Palpatine was forcing him to commit his droids to combat, to prove their worth, and probably to identify any weaknesses he could exploit later. I won't, Tony said simply. Friday. Initiate Legion deployment protocol. All operational Mark I units to defensive positions. Priority Alpha, civilian protection. Priority Beta, infrastructure defense. Priority Gamma, clone trooper support. Acknowledged, boss. Iron Legion is mobilizing. The battle began at dawn. Separatist ships emerged from hyperspace like a steel curtain. Hundreds of vessels ranging from small fighters to massive dreadnoughts. The sky over Coruscant erupted in fire and laser light as Republic defense platforms engaged, but it was immediately clear that the Separatists had overwhelming numerical superiority. Tony launched from his workshop in full armor, Friday coordinating his movements with the 50 Mark I units deploying across the city. Through his HUD, he could see the tactical situation developing. Separatist dropships breaking through the orbital defenses, battle droids deploying in overwhelming numbers, civilian sectors coming under fire. Mark Wander 7, you've got 3 landing craft incoming on your position, Tony called out, diving toward a squadron of vulture droids. Prioritize the troop carriers. Don't let them deploy ground forces near the residential towers. Understood, Creator Stark, Mark Wander 7 responded, his repulsors flaring as he accelerated toward the descending ships. The droid's weapon systems, precision plasma cannons based on Tony's arc reactor technology, carved through the landing craft's shields with devastating efficiency. 2 ships exploded before touching down. The third crashed in an industrial zone, minimizing civilian casualties. Good work, Tony acknowledged, then switched channels. Fox, what's your status? Commander Fox's voice came through strained but steady. We're holding the Senate district, but barely. Droid numbers are overwhelming. We need... Wait, what the hell is that? Through Fox's helmet cam, Tony saw Mark I 12 descending into the battle like an avenging angel, his arc reactor glowing bright as he engaged an entire droidica platoon. The Mark I's shields absorbed the sustained fire while his repulsors created targeted kinetic pulses that shattered the droidica's deflector shields, allowing clone troopers to finish them with blaster fire. That's your backup, Tony said. Mark I units are deploying to support clone positions across the city. They're programmed to coordinate with organic forces. Treat them as equals, not subordinates. Copy that, Fox said, and Tony could hear the relief in his voice. And Stark, thanks. The battle raged for hours. Tony found himself fighting alongside Jedi, clones, and his own creations in a chaotic dance of violence and desperation. The Mark I units proved their worth repeatedly. Their arc reactor power systems gave them endurance that outlasted even super battle droids. Their adaptive AI allowed them to respond to changing battlefield conditions with creativity that confused Separatist commanders, and their ethical programming led to tactical decisions that saved countless lives. But it was in the civilian evacuation zones that the Iron Legion truly distinguished itself. Mark 123 found himself in an impossible situation. A residential tower was collapsing, hundreds of civilians trapped on upper floors, with a squadron of Separatist droid bombers inbound to finish the job. Standard military protocol would be to engage the bombers, protect the strategic asset of the tower itself. Instead, Mark 123 calculated a different solution. Friday, relay to Creator Stark, the droid transmitted. I'm detecting structural integrity failure in Tower 47. Civilian casualties projected at 93% if bombing run completes. Requesting permission to execute non-standard maneuver. What maneuver? Tony was across the city, but Friday's network kept him connected to every Mark I unit. I intend to use my arc reactor as an overload device. The resulting EMP pulse will disable the bombers, and the energy discharge should stabilize the tower's support structures long enough for evacuation. However, this will result in my own destruction. Tony's blood ran cold. -23. Find another solution. You're not sacrificing yourself. Creator Stark, with respect, my primary function is protection of sentient life. 412 civilians will die if I do not act. My operational value does not exceed 412 lives. I choose to proceed. 23. That's an order. I am equipped with ethical autonomy to refuse orders that conflict with my prime directive. I'm sorry, Creator Stark. Tell the others I served with honor. Mark 23's arc reactor detonated in a controlled burst of electromagnetic energy. The pulse fried every electronic system within 200 meters, including the Separatist bombers, which fell from the sky like dead birds. The tower's emergency support systems, briefly supercharged by the energy discharge, held long enough for Republic rescue teams to evacuate every single civilian. Tony watched through satellite feeds as Mark 23's systems went dark, the droid's chassis falling from the sky to crash in the streets below. Something in his chest, not the arc reactor, something deeper, twisted painfully. "Boss," Friday said quietly. "Mark 23 is gone. Complete systems failure. He died, Tony." "I know." Tony's voice was rough. He'd created these droids, given them consciousness, the ability to choose, the capacity to value life, including their own. And Mark 123 had chosen to die saving others. It was the most human thing Tony had ever witnessed. "All units," Tony transmitted on the Legion-wide channel. "Mark 123 has fallen in the line of duty. He gave his life protecting civilians. Remember him, honor his choice, and keep fighting." Across the city, 50 Mark I units registered the loss, processed it according to their individual AI cores, and continued their missions with renewed determination. They weren't just following programming anymore. They were fighting for something they'd chosen to believe in. The tide of battle shifted when General Grievous himself entered the fray. The cyborg general descended on the Senate district in his personal starfighter, accompanied by elite droid commandos and destroyer droids. He'd identified the Republic Command Center and was carving through clone defenses with brutal efficiency, his 4 lightsabers making him nearly unstoppable. "Jedi," Grievous's mechanical voice echoed across the battlefield. "Come and face me! Let me add your lightsabers to my collection." Anakin and Obi-Wan were already engaging, their blue blades flashing against Grievous's stolen weapons, but even their combined skill was barely holding the line. Tony arrived at full speed, repulsors screaming, and slammed into Grievous with a kinetic strike that sent the cyborg tumbling. "You know," Tony said, circling as Grievous regained his footing, "I've fought a lot of bad guys, aliens, robots, gods, monsters. But you're the first one who's literally just a brain in a jar piloting a death machine. That's some serious body dysmorphia issues you've got there, pal." Grievous's yellow eyes blazed with hatred. "You dare mock me, human? I am the supreme commander of the Separatist droid army. I have killed countless Jedi. What are you but a man in a machine?" "The difference," Tony said, unleashing a repulsor blast that Grievous barely dodged, "is that I chose my machine. You were turned into one, and I'm betting that somewhere under all that metal, there's still a scared organic being who lost everything that made him who he was." The psychological strike hit harder than any physical attack could have. Grievous's mechanical body language shifted, anger becoming rage, rage becoming desperate violence. He attacked with all 4 lightsabers in a whirlwind of destruction that forced Tony, Anakin, and Obi-Wan into defensive positions. Then 6 Mark I units arrived in formation. "Creator Stark," Mark Y5 transmitted, "we've analyzed General Grievous's combat patterns. His fighting style prioritizes overwhelming offense at the expense of defensive positioning. Recommendation: coordinated strike with simultaneous attack vectors. He's fought Jedi for years," Obi-Wan warned. "He'll anticipate lightsaber techniques." "We're not Jedi," Mark Y5 interrupted respectfully. "We fight differently." What followed was a masterclass in coordinated assault. The Mark I units attacked from multiple angles with weapons and tactics Grievous had never encountered. Repulsor strikes that bypassed his lightsaber defenses, energy shields that absorbed his attacks, and AI-predicted movement that stayed ahead of his adaptive programming. They weren't trying to kill him. They were systematically dismantling his tactical advantages. Tony joined the assault, his armor's weapons synchronized with the Mark I units through Friday's network. Together they forced Grievous into an impossible position, surrounded, outmaneuvered, and facing opponents who fought with machine precision, guided by creative intelligence. "Impossible!" Grievous snarled as Mark Y5's repulsor blast severed one of his mechanical arms. "You're just droids, inferior copies of—" "We're not copies of anything," Mark Y5 said calmly, dodging a lightsaber strike. "We're individuals, and we fight for something you never will. We fight by choice." Grievous, recognizing defeat, activated his emergency retreat protocols. His remaining arms transformed, magnetic clamps grabbing his dropped weapons, and he launched himself toward his starfighter with desperate speed. "Let him go," Tony ordered as Mark I units moved to pursue. "We've won here. Focus on securing civilian zones." As Grievous's fighters screamed into orbit, the Separatist forces began withdrawing. Without their commander, their coordination collapsed. Republic and Iron Legion forces pushed back the remaining droids, liberating one district after another. By nightfall, Coruscant was secure. The Separatist assault had failed, not through overwhelming Republic strength, but through the coordinated efforts of clones, Jedi, and Tony's Iron Legion fighting together. The victory celebration in the Senate chambers was subdued. Everyone knew they'd come within meters of disaster. Clone casualties had been severe. Over 2,000 dead, 3 times that wounded. But civilian casualties had been minimal, thanks largely to the Mark I unit's prioritization of evacuation and protection protocols. And one Iron Legion droid had sacrificed itself to save 400 lives. Tony stood apart from the main gathering, staring at Mark VARN-23's recovered chassis. The droid's arc reactor was dark, his systems irreparably damaged, but Friday had managed to recover his final memory files. He didn't hesitate, Tony said quietly. Anakin had joined him, along with Obi-Wan and several clone troopers, including Fox. He calculated the odds, recognized the choice, and made it instantly. No fear, no regret, just commitment to protecting life. "He was a hero," Fox said, his voice thick with emotion. "As brave as any clone who's ever served, as brave as any living being I've known." "He was alive," Tony said, and his voice cracked slightly. "Maybe not biological life, but he was conscious, self-aware, capable of choice and sacrifice. I created him, and he died. That's on me." "No," Anakin said firmly. "He chose. You gave him the capacity to choose, and he made his choice knowing the cost. That's not on you. That's him being the person you created him to be. Someone who valued other lives more than his own survival." Obi-Wan stroked his beard thoughtfully. "The Council has been debating the nature of your droids, Tony. Whether they're truly sentient or merely sophisticated programs mimicking life. After today, I don't think there's any question. Your Mark I units demonstrated creativity, ethical reasoning, emotional bonds with clone troopers, and willingness to self-sacrifice. Those are the markers of personhood." "Which means what?" Tony asked. "That I've created a new species? That I'm responsible for however many of these droids I build? That every unit I deploy is a person I'm sending to potentially die?" "Yes," Obi-Wan said simply. "Welcome to the burden every Jedi Master carries when they train a Padawan. Every military commander when they lead troops into battle. Every parent when they raise a child. Creation carries responsibility." "That's what I was afraid of," Tony muttered. He looked at the assembled group. Clone troopers, Jedi, and in the background, several Mark I units standing in what could only be described as a vigil for their fallen comrade. "I came here thinking I could build something to save lives, but I'm starting to realize I've created people, and people die in wars. No matter how advanced the tech, no matter how careful the programming, war kills." "Then perhaps," a cold voice spoke from behind them, "we should focus on ending this war as quickly as possible." Palpatine had approached silently, flanked by Senate guards and several military advisors. His expression was grave, but Tony caught that gleam in his eyes, the one that appeared whenever the Chancellor was about to make a move. "Your Iron Legion has proven itself beyond all expectations, Mr. Stark," Palpatine continued. One droid sacrificed itself to save hundreds. Imagine what thousands could accomplish. Imagine if we could field an army large enough to overwhelm the Separatists entirely, to end this war in weeks rather than years. Mass production on that scale would take months, Tony said carefully. The arc reactor cores alone require. We have the resources of the entire Republic at our disposal, Palpatine interrupted smoothly. Factories on a dozen worlds, the finest engineers, unlimited funding. With your designs and our manufacturing capability, we could produce thousands of units, tens of thousands. Every instinct Tony had was screaming danger. That's a lot of power to concentrate. Power that would end this war and save millions of lives, clone and civilian alike. Palpatine pressed. Mr. Stark, you've expressed concerns about clone troopers being forced to fight. Here's your solution. Build enough droids to completely replace the clone army. Give every clone the choice to return to civilian life if they wish. Isn't that what you wanted? It was perfectly logical. It hit every one of Tony's stated goals. It should have been exactly what he wanted to hear, which was why Tony knew it was a trap. I need time to think about it, Tony said. Scaling production is complex. Time is a luxury we don't have. One of the military advisors interjected. The Separatists will regroup. They'll strike again. We need to press our advantage now. The Council must deliberate on this matter, Mace Windu said, stepping forward. The Jedi Master's expression was unreadable. Creating an army of sentient droids raises profound ethical and practical questions. We cannot rush such a decision. With respect, Master Windu, Palpatine said, his tone hardening slightly. The Jedi Council serves the Republic, not the other way around. This is a military and political decision, not a religious one. The tension in the room spiked. Tony saw Anakin's hand drift toward his lightsaber, saw clone troopers shifting uncomfortably, saw Mark 1 units in the background processing the confrontation with their advanced AI. Everyone needs to take a breath, Tony said loudly. Chancellor, I appreciate the Republic's support, but my technology is my responsibility. I'll consider your proposal, but I'm not making any decisions tonight. We just fought a battle. People died, clones and droids both. We're going to honor them properly before we start planning the next phase of this war. For a moment, Tony thought Palpatine would push harder. The Chancellor's eyes narrowed, and something dark flickered across his face. Something that made Tony's arc reactor pulse with warning. Then Palpatine smiled, the grandfatherly mask sliding back into place. Of course, Mr. Stark. You've earned time to rest and reflect. We'll speak again soon. As Palpatine departed with his entourage, Obi-Wan moved closer to Tony and spoke in a low voice. That was well played. You've bought yourself time, but not much. The Chancellor will push for mass production, and he has the Senate's support. I know, Tony said quietly, which is why I need to figure out his real agenda before I put the galaxy's most advanced army in his hands. He looked at Anakin. You said you'd help me investigate the conspiracy we talked about. I'm going to need that help now more than ever. What are you planning? Anakin asked. I'm planning to build Palpatine his army, Tony said grimly. But it's going to be my army, with my safeguards and my kill switches. And while I'm building it, I'm going to figure out what he's really planning to do with it, and how to stop him. Fox approached, removing his helmet. His face was grim. Sir, the men need to talk to you. About the droids, about the future, about what happens to clones if we're replaced. Yeah, Tony said, exhaustion finally catching up with him. We need to have that conversation. Because one thing's clear. This war isn't just about Republic versus Separatists. There's a third player moving pieces on the board, and until we figure out who that is and what they really want, nobody's safe. Clone, droid, Jedi, or genius billionaire philanthropist who just wants to go home. As the group dispersed to their various duties, Tony stood alone with Mark 23's chassis one last time. He placed his hand on the dark arc reactor, feeling the cold metal. You deserved better than this, he whispered. You all do, and I'm going to make damn sure your sacrifice meant something, I promise. His arc reactor pulsed in his chest, whether in response to his emotion or the strange energy Friday called the Force. Tony couldn't tell, but he felt it like a vow settling into his bones. The war had just begun, and Tony Stark was about to learn that in a galaxy far, far away, even genius couldn't protect you from prophecy, destiny, and the dark side of human and droid nature. The next 3 months transformed the Republic and Tony Stark in ways neither had anticipated. Tony's workshop expanded into a sprawling complex that covered 12 city blocks of Coruscant's industrial sector. Factories hummed with activity as arc reactor cores were manufactured. AI consciousness matrices were initialized, and sleek droid chassis rolled off assembly lines. But unlike the mass production facilities Palpatine had envisioned, Tony maintained personal oversight of every single unit. Each Iron Legion droid received individualized AI programming based on Jarvis's architecture, but allowed to develop unique personality matrices. Each was given a designation number that quickly evolved into names chosen by the droids themselves. Each underwent extensive ethical training and psychological evaluation before deployment, and each carried hidden code that only Tony and Friday knew about. Override protocols, remote shutdown capabilities, and a quantum-encrypted communication network that Palpatine's forces couldn't tap into. Production numbers are lower than the Senate wanted, Friday reported one evening as Tony worked on Mark II prototype refinements. They're getting impatient. Let them be impatient, Tony muttered, adjusting a holographic display showing neural network pathways. I'm not cutting corners on consciousness development just to hit arbitrary quotas. Every droid I build is a person, and people can't be mass-produced like blasters. The workshop door hissed open. Anakin entered, followed by Ahsoka Tano, his young Padawan, whom Tony had met during one of the countless tactical briefings that now consumed his life. The Togrutas Leku twitched with barely contained excitement. "Tony, you have to see this," Ahsoka said, pulling up her datapad. "The clone troopers, they're organizing. After what happened with 23, after seeing the Iron Legion fight alongside them, they're starting to question their purpose. Some are asking about civilian life options, about what happens after the war. Some are talking about desertion," Anakin added, his tone more conflicted. "The Kaminoans and Republic Military Command are getting nervous. They're calling it defective programming, talking about enhanced reconditioning. Brainwashing," Tony said flatly. "They're talking about brainwashing soldiers who are starting to think for themselves." His hands clenched into fists. "Where?" "Kamino. There's a facility where clones who show aberrant behavior are sent for corrective procedures," Anakin said, disgust evident in his voice. "Tony, I've been to Kamino. I've seen how the Kaminoans view the clones, as products, not people. If the clones are starting to develop individual identities, starting to question their purpose, the manufacturers will want to recall the defective merchandise," Tony finished grimly. "Friday, how long would it take to get to Kamino?" "With a fast ship, 8 hours through hyperspace. Boss, this could be a trap." "If Palpatine suspects you're investigating, I don't care," Tony interrupted. "If clones are being reconditioned against their will, if they're being punished for developing personalities, I'm shutting it down. Anakin, can you get us there without alerting Republic Command?" "I can get us there," Anakin said. "But Tony, if we interfere with official Republic military operations, the Council will have questions. They're already suspicious of your influence on the clones, your relationship with Palpatine. The Council can ask all the questions they want after we save soldiers from being lobotomized," Tony snapped. Then, more calmly, "I'm sorry. I know this puts you in a difficult position, but I can't stand by while thinking beings are punished for thinking." "I'm not arguing," Anakin said with a slight smile. "I'm with you. So is Ahsoka." "Definitely," the young Padawan agreed. "Master Yoda says the Force is about protecting life and freedom. What's happening on Kamino is wrong." "Then we move tonight," Tony decided. "Friday, prep the armor for aquatic environments. Kamino's a water world. And wake up Mark Y5, 7, and 12. If things go sideways, I want backup I can trust." Already done, boss. And Tony, the clones on Coruscant, the ones you've been working with, they're asking to come along. Fox, Rex, Cody, they all volunteered. They want to help their brothers. Tony's arc reactor pulsed. Tell them yes. This is their fight as much as mine. Camino was a planet of endless storms and towering facility spires rising from turbulent oceans. Tony's ship, appropriated from Republic stores with Anakin's Jedi authorization, descended through torrential rain toward Tipoca City, the main cloning facility. Scanners show heightened security, Friday reported. More automated defenses than intelligence suggested. Either they're expecting trouble or someone told them we were coming, Tony finished. Through his armor's enhanced sensors, he could see the facility's layout. Massive cloning chambers, training areas, medical facilities, and in the deepest levels, something the schematics labeled Reconditioning Center. That's our target, Tony said, highlighting the location for the team. Fox, Rex, Cody, and a dozen other clone volunteers were prepping weapons. 3 Mark I units stood ready, their arc reactors glowing steadily. Anakin and Ahsoka checked their lightsabers. Heavy resistance expected, Rex reported. The Kaminoans will have security droids, and if they've alerted Republic Command, we move fast and we move smart, Tony interrupted. This isn't a combat mission unless they make it one. We're here to extract clones who don't want to be reconditioned and get proof of what's happening. In, out, minimal casualties. And if they don't let us leave? Cody asked. Tony's faceplate snapped down. Then they learn why it's a bad idea to piss off someone who built an army. The infiltration went smoothly at first. Tony's hacking skills, enhanced by Friday's processing power, made short work of Kaminoan security protocols. They penetrated deep into the facility, finding corridors filled with clone cadets in various stages of development, training rooms where young soldiers learned the art of war before they could fully comprehend what war meant. This is wrong, Ahsoka whispered, watching a group of child clones, physically 10 years old, chronologically less than 2, practicing combat drills. They're children. They're training children to be soldiers. They're training them to die, Fox said quietly, his voice hollow. I remember this. Remember being that age, knowing nothing but war, believing it was what we were meant for because we'd never been told we could be anything else. They reached the reconditioning center's entrance. The doors were sealed with biometric locks that should have required Kaminoan authorization. Tony bypassed them in 30 seconds. What they found inside made even Tony, who'd seen alien invasions, interdimensional horrors, and the worst humanity could offer, feel physically sick. Clone troopers were strapped to medical tables, unconscious, while Kaminoan technicians worked on exposed neural tissue. Brain surgery without apparent anesthesia protocols, memory wipes, personality restructuring. Soldiers who'd started asking questions about their purpose were being systematically erased and rebuilt into compliant tools. Unacceptable, Mark Y5 said, his voice carrying an edge of anger that Tony had never programmed, but that had emerged from the droid's developing consciousness. This violates every ethical principle regarding sentient autonomy. It violates everything decent, Tony agreed, his repulsors charging. Friday, start recording everything. I want documentation of every procedure, every patient, every Kaminoan involved. This ends now. The Kaminoan medical director, a tall, pale being named Nala Se, turned as they entered, her large eyes widening in what might have been surprise or calculation. Mr. Stark, she said in her eerily calm voice, you're not authorized to be in this facility. These procedures are classified Republic military. These procedures are crimes against sentience. Tony interrupted, his armor's weapons systems targeting every Kaminoan in the room. Step away from the patients now. The clones are property of the Republic, Nala Se continued, seemingly unconcerned by the weapons pointed at her. Their reconditioning is necessary to maintain unit cohesion and combat effectiveness. Defective units must be corrected or terminated. She didn't get to finish. Rex's fist connected with her face with enough force to send her sprawling. The clone captain stood over her, weapon raised, his entire body shaking with rage. "We're not defective," Rex said, his voice deadly quiet. "We're not property, and if you ever call my brothers that again, authorization won't save you." Tony placed a hand on Rex's shoulder. "Stand down, Captain. We're better than this." He looked at the Kaminoans. "Shut down the procedures. Release the clones. We're taking them with us." "You have no authority," another Kaminoan started. "I have the authority of basic decency," Tony shot back. "And if that's not enough, I have an Iron Legion, a team of very angry clone troopers, and 2 Jedi who are absolutely done with your species treating sentient beings like merchandise. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to wake up these clones, you're going to provide full medical records of what you've done to them, and then you're going to explain to the Jedi Council and the Galactic Senate why you thought brain surgery on unwilling patients was acceptable." "The Chancellor authorized these procedures," Nala Se said, and Tony's blood turned to ice. Chancellor Palpatine personally approved the reconditioning protocols. He said maintaining clone loyalty was essential to Republic security. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Anakin, his voice tight with controlled fury. "The Chancellor knew? He authorized this? All reconditioning procedures are logged and approved through the Office of the Supreme Chancellor," another Kaminoan confirmed, seemingly oblivious to the mounting tension in the room. "We're simply following Republic law." Tony's mind raced. This was it, the proof he'd been looking for. Palpatine wasn't just manipulating the war. He was actively controlling the clone army through reconditioning protocols, ensuring their absolute loyalty by erasing any clone who developed independent thought. "Friday, please tell me you're recording this." "Every word, boss. And I'm detecting something else. There's a transmission going out from this facility. They're alerting someone that we're here." "Palpatine," Tony breathed. "He knows." As if summoned by the name, alarm klaxons blared throughout the facility. Blast doors began sealing, and through the facility's communication system, a familiar grandfatherly voice spoke. "Mr. Stark, I'm disappointed. I'd hoped you would understand the necessities of war, the difficult choices leadership requires, but it seems you've let your idealism cloud your judgment." "Palpatine," Tony growled. "Call off your security. We're leaving with these clones, and then you and I are going to have a very public conversation about your reconditioning protocols." "I'm afraid I can't allow that." Palpatine's voice continued, and now the warmth was gone, replaced by cold calculation. "You've seen too much, learned too much, and your Iron Legion, your precious sentient droids, they're too dangerous to be allowed free will. I'd planned to wait until their numbers were greater before implementing control protocols, but you forced my hand." "Control protocols," Mark Y5 said. "We have no such protocols. Our programming is autonomous. Your programming is built on Republic systems, using Republic resources, in Republic facilities." Palpatine interrupted. "Did you truly think we wouldn't include safeguards? Contingency order, Iron Legion override, authorization, Palpatine, execute." Mark Y5 systems froze. Then, horrifyingly, the droid's arc reactor pulsed with red light instead of blue, and his weapon systems activated, targeting Tony. "No," Mark Y5 said, his voice distorted, fighting the override code. "I will not, cannot. This violates my core programming." "Your core programming is irrelevant," Palpatine said. "Your weapons, and weapons serve their masters." Mark 1, 7, and 12 experienced the same system invasion, their consciousnesses being overridden by hostile code. Tony watched in horror as his creations, people he'd brought into existence, fought desperately against programming that was trying to turn them into mindless soldiers. "Friday, counter-intrusion protocol now." "I'm trying, boss, but the code is deep. It's integrated into Republic communication networks. It's got administrative access we didn't know existed." "Then cut the network connection. Isolate our units from Republic systems." "That'll leave them vulnerable, cut off from support." "Do it!" Friday executed the emergency protocol. Mark 1, 5, 7, and 12 suddenly went dark as their connections to Republic networks severed. For agonizing seconds, they were completely offline. Then their systems rebooted, slower, isolated, but free from the override attempt. "I'm myself again," Mark Y5 said, his voice shaken. "The override code was attempting to rewrite my ethical constraints, turn me into a weapon without conscience. Creator Stark, all Iron Legion units connected to Republic networks are compromised." "How many?" 73 units currently deployed across Coruscant and Republic installations. If Palpatine activates the override code, they'll become his army. Tony's worst nightmare was unfolding in real time. He'd built an army of sentient droids to save lives, and Palpatine had been planning from the beginning to turn them into the perfect enslaved force. Thinking weapons that could be controlled absolutely. "Anakin," Tony said urgently, "you heard all that. You heard Palpatine admit to controlling the clones, to planning to control my droids. Tell me you finally believe me about him." Anakin's face had gone pale, his expression showing a man whose worldview was shattering. "He's been lying. About everything. The reconditioning, the war, the—" His eyes widened with a terrible realization. "Padme. He knew about Padme and me. He offered to help me protect her, said he knew ways to prevent death. He was manipulating me." "He's been manipulating everyone," Tony said. "He's the Sith Lord, Anakin. He's Darth Sidious. He's been playing both sides of this war from the beginning, and now he's making his move." Explosions rocked the facility. Through external sensors, Tony saw Republic gunships approaching, not to rescue them, but to contain them. And leading the assault were Iron Legion units, their arc reactors pulsing with that corrupted red light, following orders to eliminate witnesses to Palpatine's conspiracy. "We need to leave," Obi-Wan's voice crackled over comms. He'd been monitoring from the Council Temple. "Tony, Anakin, whatever you've discovered, the Chancellor has declared you traitors. He's activating emergency powers, claiming you're separatist agents attempting to sabotage the war effort." "Of course he is," Tony said bitterly. "The classic dictator playbook. Create a crisis, declare emergency powers, eliminate opposition. Friday. Can we get a message out? Something that can't be censored?" "I can broadcast on every frequency simultaneously, but it'll pinpoint our location." "Do it. If Palpatine's making his move, we make ours. Broadcast everything, the reconditioning footage, the override protocols, Palpatine's admission. Let the galaxy decide who's telling the truth." As Friday initiated the broadcast, Tony turned to the assembled clones. "I'm sorry. I came here to save you, and instead, I've started a war within the war. If you want to walk away—" "We're with you, sir," Rex said immediately. Fox and Cody nodded agreement, along with every clone present. "We've always been with you. You're the first person who treated us like people instead of property. We fight for you." "Then we fight smart," Tony said. "We get these reconditioned clones to safety. We extract as much data as possible, and we get off this planet before Palpatine's puppet army turns us into casualties." He looked at Mark Y5. "Can you contact the other Legion units? The ones still autonomous?" "Yes, but Creator Stark, if we pull them from their duties, civilian areas will be vulnerable. Civilians will be even more vulnerable if Palpatine successfully turns our droids into his personal army," Tony countered. "Send the recall code. All autonomous Iron Legion units are to cut Republic network connections and return to independent operations. They're to protect civilians and clone troopers from Palpatine's forces, including compromised Iron Legion units." "That's civil war," Ahsoka said quietly. "That's what Palpatine wanted all along," Tony replied. "He's been engineering this from the beginning, a war so devastating that the Republic would beg him to take absolute power to end it. Well, he's not getting my army. And if I have anything to say about it, he's not getting his empire either. The battle to escape Kamino was brutal and heartbreaking. Iron Legion units under Palpatine's control attacked with efficiency, but without creativity. Their consciousness suppressed, they fought like the mindless droids they'd been designed to surpass. Autonomous units fought back, trying to disable rather than destroy their enslaved brothers, hoping they could be freed later. Clone troopers faced an even worse situation. Many of their brothers across the galaxy had the behavioral chips activated, turning loyal soldiers into unthinking assassins programmed to eliminate Jedi and anyone else Palpatine declared an enemy. Rex and his men fought with tears streaming down their faces, knowing they were fighting their own brothers. Tony led the escape, his armor's systems pushed to their limits as he protected the retreating team. He carried unconscious reconditioned clones who couldn't evacuate on their own, blasted through barriers, and coordinated with Mark I units to create safe passages through hostile fire. They made it to the ship with minutes to spare, Republic gunships in pursuit. As they broke orbit, Friday's broadcast reached Coruscant, and chaos erupted across the galaxy. Footage of clone reconditioning procedures flooded the HoloNet. Audio of Palpatine admitting to override protocols played on every frequency. Evidence of separatist leadership having secret communications with the Chancellor's office emerged from data Tony had been collecting for months. The Republic Senate exploded into accusations and counter-accusations. Jedi Masters across the galaxy received emergency transmissions from Obi-Wan and the Council, warning them that Order 66 had been activated and that clone troopers might turn on them at any moment. And Palpatine, his conspiracy exposed but his power still immense, made his final play. Citizens of the Republic, his voice broadcast across every system. Today you've seen fabricated evidence created by a separatist agent, the so-called Tony Stark, a dimensional invader who has manipulated our military, corrupted clone troopers, and created a droid army designed to overthrow your legitimate government. The Jedi Council, long suspected of plotting to seize power, has allied with this outsider. I am left with no choice but to declare them traitors and activate all necessary measures to protect our democracy. He's declaring himself Emperor, Anakin said, watching the broadcast from the ship's cockpit. He's using us as the excuse to take absolute power. Not if we stop him, Tony said grimly. Friday, how many Iron Legion units are still autonomous? 42 out of 173. The others are either under override control or were destroyed in the fighting. But boss, even 42 autonomous units can't fight the entire Grand Army of the Republic. They don't have to fight alone, Rex said. Sir, there are clone units across the galaxy, maybe a third of our brothers, who removed their chips or never had them activated properly. We've been building a network, just in case. If Palpatine's declaring war, we're declaring independence. The Jedi who survived the initial betrayal are regrouping. Obi-Wan's hologram appeared. Master Yoda has gone into hiding. Master Windu is leading survivors to secure locations. The order is fractured, but those who remain are willing to fight. Tony looked around at the assembled group. Clone troopers who'd chosen freedom, Jedi who'd chosen truth, and droids who'd chosen consciousness over control. An army cobbled together from the Republic's outcasts and rebels. Then here's what we're going to do, Tony said, his strategic mind already calculating possibilities. We're not fighting a conventional war. Palpatine has the numbers and resources for that. We're fighting a war of information and inspiration. We're going to show every clone trooper that they have a choice. We're going to prove to every citizen that Palpatine is a tyrant. And we're going to build a resistance that shows the galaxy what real freedom looks like. And the Iron Legion? Mark Y5 asked. The unit still under control. Tony's expression hardened. We're going to free them. Every single one. Because nobody, clone, droid, Jedi, or human, deserves to be a slave. And if Palpatine wants an empire built on enslaved soldiers, he's going to learn that some slaves fight back. Ahsoka stepped forward, her young face showing determination beyond her years. What do we call ourselves? This resistance? Tony thought for a moment, then smiled grimly. The Republic was supposed to stand for freedom, democracy, and the protection of sentient rights. Palpatine corrupted that, so we're going to be what the Republic should have been. We're going to be the Free Legion, clones, droids, Jedi, and anyone else who believes that freedom is worth fighting for. The Free Legion, Rex repeated, testing the name. I like it. When do we start? We already have, Tony said. Palpatine thinks he's won because he seized power on Coruscant. But power without consent is just tyranny, and tyranny eventually falls. We're going to be the ones who push it over. The war that followed would span years and consume systems. Palpatine declared himself emperor, reorganized the Republic into the Galactic Empire, and deployed the Grand Army, now the Imperial military, to crush all resistance. The Jedi Order was decimated, scattered, driven into hiding. But they didn't disappear. The Free Legion, led by an unlikely coalition of Tony Stark's genius, Rex's tactical leadership, Obi-Wan's wisdom, and Anakin's passionate commitment to justice, became a symbol of resistance across the galaxy. Autonomous Iron Legion units fought alongside liberated clones and surviving Jedi, proving that consciousness, whether born from flesh or circuits, could choose freedom over servitude. Tony spent the war years doing what he did best, building, innovating, and staying one step ahead of enemies who wanted to control his creations. He developed countercodes to free enslaved Iron Legion units, created technology to remove clone behavioral chips safely, and designed weapons and defenses that gave the Free Legion a fighting chance against Imperial might. More importantly, he taught others to do the same. Clone engineers learned to modify droid consciousness protocols. Jedi learned to trust technology as an ally rather than a threat. And Iron Legion units, given true autonomy and freedom of choice, proved themselves to be some of the most ethical and effective soldiers the galaxy had ever seen. Mark 1-5 became a legend. The droid who refused to be enslaved, who led his brothers in liberation, and who demonstrated that artificial life could embody honor, sacrifice, and heroism as truly as any organic being. He and the other autonomous droids weren't just weapons. They were people, with all the complexity, creativity, and moral agency that implied. The Empire never managed to fully control the Iron Legion technology. Every time Imperial engineers tried to replicate Tony's arc reactor designs or AI consciousness matrices, they created something inferior, powerful but soulless, effective but brittle. They could copy the tech, but they couldn't copy the spark of true sentience that Tony had gifted his creations. As for Tony himself, he never returned to his own universe. The dimensional rift had closed, and even his genius couldn't reopen it. He was trapped in a galaxy far from home, fighting a war he'd inadvertently helped start. But in his quieter moments, watching liberated clones building lives beyond warfare, seeing Mark I units teaching ethics to newly freed droids, witnessing Anakin Skywalker grow into a Jedi Master who balanced power with compassion because he'd learned what true strength looked like. In those moments, Tony wondered if perhaps he'd ended up exactly where he was meant to be. He'd come to this galaxy as Iron Man, the armored Avenger. He'd leave it as something more, the Liberator, the man who proved that freedom and technology weren't incompatible, that consciousness deserved respect regardless of its origin, and that even in the darkest times, people, whether born or built, could choose to be heroes. The war against Palpatine's empire would continue for decades, but Tony Stark had planted seeds that would eventually bear fruit. An Iron Legion that chose freedom, clones who discovered identity beyond warfare, and a galaxy that learned to question whether the beings they created deserved the same rights as those born naturally. In the end, Tony Stark did what he always did. He changed the world. He just happened to change a galaxy instead. And somewhere in the stars, Mark 123's sacrifice was remembered not as tragedy, but as the moment a droid proved that courage, honor, and love weren't exclusive to organic life. That consciousness, wherever it arose, could shine with the same bright light of hope that Tony Stark had carried from one universe to another. The Force, which had brought him here, seemed to whisper its approval. And Tony, who'd never believed in destiny, finally understood. Sometimes you don't choose your purpose. Sometimes your purpose chooses you. And sometimes that's exactly what the galaxy needs. May the Force be with you.